Alrighty, my recording for my typology study. I'll just start.
Recording in progress.
Okay, cool. So my name's Hannah and my typology study was about the dry landscape gardens in Japan. So basically I just found several different examples of dry landscape gardens throughout different time periods, ranging from the 15th century to the 20th century. So basically dry landscape gardens are sort of a minimalist organisation of materials such as white gravel, stones, moss, a small amount of shrubbery, and together they sort of explore ideas of nature and the universe, and there's a lot of symbolism within the gardens. Additionally, they are dry landscape gardens, so there is no water. However, water is represented through the different raking patterns of the gravel. So basically, the gardens were inspired by the Chinese Song Dynasty landscape paintings and garden designs, and also the intro of Zen Buddhism to Japan in I think it was the 6th century. But it pretty much, the dry landscape gardens became relevant in the Muromachi period, which was the late 13th century. So basically they're found in Kyoto mainly, in Zen temples in the Japans, not as much in the city centre, but kind of the outskirts of the mountains. I think the mountains are called Higashima, Kitayama, and Nishiyama. So basically the gardens aren't meant to be walked through or strolled through. They're meant to be viewed from sort of decks or verandas surrounding the temples, or rooms. I think some of them are called shiros. But they provide a space for reflection and introspection, not only from just viewing the garden, but the sort of movement of meditation and the sort of intricacies when raking the gravel. Cool. So the materials that are often found in the garden, which I've kind of gone over, is the gravel, sand, moss, prune trees, and they create symbolic representations of natural landscapes. Also, the gardens are usually rectangular, flat, and south-facing. They often have a low wall and are adjacent to the Zen temples. And I've just got some key examples down there. So my first case study was the Kare Sansui, which also means dry mountain water and is sort of a term used in Japan for dry landscape gardens. But this specific one at the Ryoanji temple is sort of a prodigy of landscape gardens, and is recognized as the most famous landscape garden. So basically it was designed and built in the late 15th century. The designer is actually unknown, and it's about 10 by 3 meters and contains white gravel, stones, moss, and clay wall. So basically this garden is so special because the designer, whoever it was, basically abandoned the allegory of nature and the universe and created this sort of completely abstract garden. The garden contains 15 stones. However, when you're viewing the garden, you can actually only see 14 stones at a time. And apparently you can only see the 15th stone when you are enlightened. So this garden obviously is quite popular because people make their own connections and assumptions about the narrative. My next garden was the Daisen-in garden at the Daisen-in temple, which was built in the early 16th century by Kogaku Shuko. So while the Ryoanji, the Kasansui garden, the previous one, was quite abstract, this one was very allegorical, and the stones and the sand sort of represent the what do they represent? Sorry. They represent the passage of life. So it's interesting. And the Hojo Garden, which is in the Nanzenji Temple in Kyoto, uses what's called borrowed landscape. So the landscape, including the mountains and the trees behind the garden, is quite significant. And it also has a nature allegory of a tiger and the cubs crossing a river. So basically, the sketches of the gardens, you can see that they have the walls are adjacent to temples, these darker lines, and there's kind of a sparse use of greenery.